Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Defining and Delivering Brand Experiences. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. The webinar will last for approximately 45 minutes. All attendees are on mute, so the only voices you should hear throughout the webinar will be mine and the presenters. You'll have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the chat box of the control panel. You can send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll collect these and address as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. I'd now like to hand you over to Sara Royle, who will be today's presenter.
Thank you and welcome. The webinar today focuses on brands' experiences as a taste of the topics that arise during CIM courses and qualifications. My role today is to bring alive the topic based on a career working in agencies and in-house. My specialisms are focusing on brands, communications, business development and sponsorship. I've studied the CIM qualifications and found them invaluable, but today I want to look at brands across sectors and to give you some example case studies. What I relish is the opportunity to grow careers and brands. The objectives today are fivefold. Firstly, to look at brands, theory, practical aspects, customer journeys, how we manifest the brand experience, and then looking at case studies for the challenges and opportunities. And we'll end up with 5 key tips that I'd recommend for developing brands. In terms of brand experiences, what do we mean? We tend to take brands for granted, but we all know what we love and like. But how do we actually distill that into something that's actionable? How do you craft a brand and navigate it to maximize customer experience? The purpose of this slide is to show a series of definitions. The first 2, top left, are theory definitions, a set of mental associations held by the consumer to add to the perceived value of a product or service. How do we unpick that? Is it just a name, a term, a design, or a symbol that differentiates us from one company to another? Well, I personally love the ones from Branson, Jobs and Kawasaki. They bring alive what a brand really is. First of all, Jobs, the chance to make a memory is the very essence of brand marketing. Branson, the brands that will survive and thrive are those that have a purpose beyond profit. And Kawasaki, his 3 pillars, the likability of Virgin, the trustworthiness of Zappos, and a product of Apple. Wouldn't that be a dream brand to work for? So John Hegarty is an advertising guru. Obviously, these are inspirational business leaders. What he suggests is you start with a blank page and you have to have an idea. And then from that idea, something that communicates the brand and its values. To a certain extent, it's part magic, part science, part business focused. Let's actually explore a model that helps us deconstruct and construct a brand. Capra came up with a 6-facet model that's very useful to help us decode. First of all, physique, top center. The critical thing here is it has to have some form of tangible elements, some benefits, attributes that are distinctive, that stand out. Now, an easy example to use is perfume. It has the scent. It has beautiful packaging, wonderful shape of bottle. The second one is personality. These are characteristics, human elements. So for perfume, we use models, we use actors to try and embody and tangibilize what those traits might be. Culture is a fascinating one because this is where it's the values of the organization that need to permeate employees and that actually inspire employees to deliver the brand experience. Brand culture is vital to differentiate. So, for example, British Airways promises you professionalism, whilst Virgin might promise you adventure. When we look at the external factors, when we look at things like relationships, for example, these are vital to service brands, particularly business to business, where it's so much more than the product that you're purchasing. This relies on interactions between people, so defining this very carefully is absolutely critical to success. Hence, later on, customer journeys are so key. First Direct is a great example of a brand that leads the field in service experiences. Customer reflection is fascinating because it's actually how customers want to be seen, their attitude of mind. Now, a later example we use with Dove, to a certain extent they got that wrong by showing people what they know, but not what they wanted to see. More of that a bit later. The critical thing here, Coca-Cola can be an example. You can depict youth and energy which appeals to people of all ages, and to remember that people identify with the attitude. The self-image of the consumer is vitally important because this is actually all about how they see themselves. I feel this, I am this. So I might wear a brand with a logo, or I might have a handbag with a logo, and I can feel and identify with the sportiness or the style of a brand. When I look at aspects of the brand prism, they help you construct the brand and give you some pillars, some things to work with. But I think we need to look a little bit deeper. How else can we actually define what a brand stands for? Now, critically, marketers and ad agencies can often differ here. A marketer might want a written document, a model, a theorem. An ad agency wants a manifesto, a brand definition. So a model that can work between the two of us quite well is a brand onion. The top two, positioning and personality, are about the external manifestation of the brand. Positioning, how do we differentiate from competitors? Personality, the characteristics that informs customers. And then internal elements of values and vision are the way we actually define ourselves internally and plan the brand identity. The critical thing about these models and why we need to critique them is we tend to respond to brands intuitively, with hunches, with our instincts, typically before rational reason starts to kick in. So let's look overseas, perhaps, for some inspiration. The best global brands in the world is a great annual survey compiled by Interbrand, and I find it a great source of inspiration and research too. One of the things this best global brand map suggests is what relevance does country of origin have? If you think of Italy, you think of leather, customized into handbags, belts, or shoes. And if you look at the top 20 that are listed there from Apple to H&M, one of the things you start to notice is the predominance of the USA, Japan, Germany, Sweden, France. And in fact, I believe Interbrand are working with companies in Sri Lanka to bring them to global brand status. The critical thing really is what we're trying to do is to find the brand's DNA, what would make it stand out in the world from competitors and rivals. So one of the things we're looking to try and do as we go through the brand experience is to build in both rational and emotional cues that are meaningful to our customers and our stakeholders. And there's the love-respect axis map that was created by Roberts in 2006, which provides an interesting insight into elements that can be more meaningful to consumers. Now, you see the axes have both respect and love. Now, a brave marketer would stand before a finance director and say, I need this budget to grow my brand to build it into a love mark. But it's a lot more than that. It's really tapping into what the brand means to a customer and creating something a little bit special. If we explore this model, first looking at bottom left with commodities. Commodities are the classic things like salt, iron, gravel. We don't need them, we don't care about them that much. We don't even desire them. So they're things that tend to have low prices and don't trouble our lives much with. They tend to be a place that you don't want your brand to go because then it tends to be price-based competition. On the right-hand side at the bottom with fads, these are obviously short-term, right for the moment, often kids' crazes, things like yo-yos, but will move on quickly to the next thing. It's possible to make a lot of money with a short-term fad. They're fun, but the critical thing is timing matters, and you could get stuck with an awful lot of stock. So it's a clever and risky business that focuses purely on building brands as fads or infatuations. Now, if we look top left with low love but high respect, we see brands, and in a way that's a little bit scary because surely they should have high love, high respect. The critical thing about brands is it's where we invest most of our resources. But the challenge we have in the modern workplace is the fact that even brands can fall into commodity category. It gets more competitive, even more with digital and online. There are tight margins. There's lack of individuality. Brands can become bland. The The critical thing that brands have to do is to earn consistent respect, but also they need strong management to build in continuous improvement. But more than that, to actually build an emotional connection with the customer that is actually something that's meaningful, that's relevant, that's personal, that's loyal and sustaining. The brands that tend to move into the love mark category tend to be the likes of Body Shop, Apple. They suggest something different because they add value to people's lives. So how do we consider the value of perhaps what a love mark is? And the critical thing that we need to really tap in for is to tap into the reason for its being, the purpose, the benefit the customer uses it for. If we go back to a metaphor for a brand, if we think about simple objects, for example, bricks, what can you add to a brick to make it a love mark? You have to step back and really look at the product or service and look at the meaning to the customer. Bricks actually suggest something that's solid, that's home, that's warm, that's safe, that's protective, that's your first home, that's a dream. So the critical thing really to create a love mark is you've got to earn respect from your customer first, and then you begin to build the loyalty and the commitments and the relevance. So hence Apple tends to live and breathe in the love mark category along with the likes of Virgin. Likability, charisma, innovation are all aspects that make a love mark truly special. So how now do we actually connect a brand to our experience or the customer experience? The 4 essentials of customer experience here, when you look at the column on the left, reliability, convenience, responsiveness, relevance, they're actually quite ordinary words. But in combination, crafting a journey for your customer become incredibly important. Of all of the 4 areas, reliability is the single most important area. You keep up and you live up to your promises. Relevance has becoming all the more vital. Ofcom research from 2016 highlighted that we're all craving a digital detox. There's information overload. So relevance and simplicity are vital areas for consumers, which actually make their life a lot easier too. So the 4 essentials of customer experience are all about what you do and how you bring your brand to life. So what's actually the reality of a customer experience? The first quote is interesting because it's a little bit like making music. It's the orchestration of disparate instruments, channels, resources, tools, methods, creativity to create some sort of harmony that equals a seamless experience for your customers. The authentic brand storytelling is fascinating, particularly from the love mark categorization. We all remember the Google Garage startup, the kitchen table. So if your brand has a unique start story, something that's individual, that's personal, that's relevant, it's vital to bring that to the forefront as the cornerstone and seeds of your brand story. Let's have a little look now at customer journeys in practice and perhaps what touch points and MOTs mean. When you look at the picture, you can see the colour coding. The purple are meant to represent moments of truth and the yellow, touch points. The difference between a touch point and the purple moments of truth is that the purple moments of truth are much more significant. It's where time and experience of the brand reveal its true promise. It's where a love mark or the commitment a customer sees starts to come to fruition because they realise the service is special or it's for them. So moments of truth are those love moments where the customer gains what they need and they know it's the brand for them. It's a proof of the brand's promise. Respect comes from consistency. So the lesson to learn with these customer journeys, and whether you use it from McKinsey, Smart Insights, critically you must map it from the customer's perspective, not from the communication tools that you send them. You need to show or exhibit a mix of on and offline elements into that customer journey so you see the customer's preferred route, and then you can begin to diagnose what are touch points and what are moments of truth. In terms of customer priorities, Solis has some interesting work on business models and designing in for user experience. And he suggests 5 key areas that matter to customers in the on-demand economy. First of all, immediacy, as in serve me now, I want to know now. Think with Google research highlights this too. Convenience, it's where I want it. Perhaps it's click and collect, or it's a time to suit me, or it's particular flexibility. Personalization, I want it customized to my particular needs or preference. In terms of transparency, no hidden surprises, no unexpected costs. And the final area, peer-to-peer exchanges, is building in the social interaction and presence for referrals, reviews, and recommendations. They're all part of the customer journey. They're all part of the customer experience. So if we break down a customer relationship cycle, we can begin to see that there are 4 core phases from acquisition, development, retention to decline. Ideally, we want to build in loyalty to avoid the risk of decline. The touch points can occur obviously across that journey, and they will vary in location and intensity. The critical thing is really understanding it from the customer's perspective. So what would you do if you had to start a new brand today? Well, the key tips really here are have a clear purpose. Branson recommends above profit. You must live like the customer, so ethnography or netnography, really get into the way they live their lives, their pressure points, their fun points, their pain points. Define and refine values, so you've got the brand essence, vitally both the emotional and rational cues, and remember that emotional cues are particularly important. Build the organisation and your business model to identify what really matters, what needs to be physical, what needs to be virtual. Recruit employees for attitude and aptitude. A willing individual is far easier to mould to live your brand values. Vitally important to deliver, develop and evolve, but also to stay consistent to your values over time. Remember the construct of reliability. And above all, keep it simple, keep it straightforward, because in a digital detox era, overcomplication is too much. So to summarise the first part of the presentation, there's a useful quote from Solis where he highlights your brand is the sum of the experiences employees and customers have with your brand in each touch point throughout their life cycle. So one of the things you have the luxury of if you start a new brand is you can actually design each moment or episode across that customer journey. For an existing brand organisation, it's about diagnosing the customer journey and then revisiting each of those touch points. Let's now have a little look at some case studies, those that get it right and perhaps those that get it wrong. And just remember, we're also all human. So the challenges, first of all. Well, topicality-wise, first up has to be Chanel. A boomerang for £1,500 is a slightly unusual one, but in creating the boomerang, they managed to draw criticism for offending Indigenous Australian culture. So one of the things that is important to consider is don't hijack products or services. Really think carefully about the relevance. Uber have been in the news for all the right and the wrong reasons. A market disruptor, very successful, with a clever, simple service. But the fast growth has caused some particular issues with culture. So going back to Capra's brand prism, we can see areas that we've got to fix quite clearly. Employee rights, whether taxi drivers were employed or self-employed, took a test legal case, which would have been better perhaps negotiated outside of court. But at the end of the day, we as customers have a responsibility too. We all like low prices and convenience, but there is actually a human cost. So what about Dove, I mentioned earlier? Well, Dove have won many accolades for their Real Beauty campaign, and they've done great work for young girls building their self-esteem across programs. Their Real Beauty campaign has celebrated all shapes and sizes of women, but then they decided to actually embody them in bottles and managed to create a backlash against the brand despite all of its good works. And the reality here from a Lovemarks and a brand prism perspective is that actually the idea of shape and size is much better in our minds than it is as a physical bottle in the hand, reminding of all perhaps our flaws or improvement areas. So Dove, great brand, bit of a mistake with product innovation. Airbnb, great alternative to hotels, flexible, on-demand accommodation, extra revenue for a homeowner. But unfortunately, it got hijacked by the fact that burglars unwittingly realized that they could book accommodation and burgle the house. They could also become venues for house parties as well. So their process was great, but the situation was it got hijacked. Whilst their brand essence is excellent, book unique homes and experience a city like a local, there are now some trust issues that they've created that perhaps has lessened respect for the brand. Now, Paul United aren't alone, as you'll see, with issues that they've had for their particular brand. The first bullet point is an interesting and salutary warning for brands. Among the general public in the US, its score dropped from 18, that's plus 18, just before the scandal of the bullet points below, to minus 40 immediately after the issues. But it has actually improved, but only to minus 34. Paul United, when it went wrong, it just kept going wrong, charging soldiers extra costs for luggage, a scorpion escaped, posting security codes on the website, removing passengers. And clearly there are major cultural and brand issues to fix there for United. But actually, they're not the only ones to suffer these issues in the way that they treat customers, and Delta and American Airlines have suffered too. So one of the things that we could do to avoid some of these problems is make sure that we've got good metrics, emotional and rational metrics though. So the four areas here that are useful are customer experience metrics that obviously link to business objectives and goals. So performance oriented. Actionable, which means that they occur in real time. They focus on improving experience. We can respond promptly to them. Predictive. Customer satisfaction is great as a metric, but it's inherently historic. We need things that help us look forward to check for cause and effect issues that we can fix. Sustained. We need to make sure that we use a relevant survey method and capture data that allows us to make informed, real-time decisions. At the end of the day, you are what you measure, so customer journey and touch points provide a unified way to measure what matters most to customers. So summing up, hopefully what we've learnt so far is a great quote from Roberts. Invention is the product of a creative or curious mind. Innovation is something that changes the life of the customer. It changes the life of the customer in some way or the world in which the customer experiences things. That's an innovation, and that's the real triumph for a marketer and brands. So let's now explore some of the positives and successes. I've included a number of surveys that are annual surveys. I definitely sign up to them or look out for them because they're great sources of inspiration, but it's also useful to know what the judgment criteria is as well. So first up, as a source of inspiration, is Britain's Cool Brands. And an obvious point to make that Apple is number one, and they are US, but Cool Brands are voted for by a combination of experts and 1,300 members of the British public. When you look across the brands that are listed there, you notice that there's tech, luxury, entertainment, emotion, and experience. And so these are very accessible brands, predominantly biased though to consumers. What are the judgment criteria? The four core areas they use: authenticity, desirability, innovation, and originality. So those are four mantras that I think are great for marketers to have as part of what we do. Intercontinental Hotel Group are a client of Interbrand. I don't work for Interbrand, but the benefit of these case studies is they illustrate key points. The key point that's interesting here is to compare it with Airbnb. What could Intercontinental Hotel Group do differently? The critical thing that they had as a problem was people would check in and check out without much of a memory. So the research that was uncovered helped to identify the fact that actually staff and the room experience could be real differentiators, creating genuine experiences with local knowledge, so that actually people have a sense of place an idea of the locality, and a more meaningful local experience. So the new proposition in the know that Interbrand created had a significant increase straight away. First of all, they identified that if they improved staff interaction and local knowledge, they could actually garner £60 million worth more in profit. But the results were impressive too. 10% increase in brand consideration, 12% increase in revenue per room, and a 26% increase in share price. So more experiential, emotionally led brand experience was successful there. Now, topicality-wise, no presentation on brand could really ignore the way that Theresa May came to power. And it's hard to actually believe that it was 15 years ago that she actually wore some cheeky kitten heels in animal print. The critical thing about Theresa May is she's had to evolve as a brand as she stepped forward as leader of the Tory party. She's got an inspirational leader to follow in the sense of Elizabeth I. But what's really interesting about her behaviour and performance to date is the fact that she's created an individual and signature look that stands out very well against suited rivals. But also in an Edelman Trust Barometer survey this year, she was the only politician trusted by just over a third of the population, far ahead of any other politician. So we focused on a number of different brands. Let's have a little look at B2B. Now, B2B is a significant area of the marketplace. We have longer purchase cycles, typically closer to customers because of service demands. There are many more participants with things like decision-making units. Touch points and moments of truth are even more important. The brand promise has to sustain relationships over 1 to 3 years typically, but that offers more opportunities for loyalty. But the challenge is that with requests for proposals, costs and prices can come under threat from competitive pricing. So what actually could you do to improve B2B? An inspirational resource, sort of brand and performance-wise, is Management Today's annual guide of Britain's most admired companies. Most of these companies are sizable PLCs, and the winner, ARM, that specialises in microchips, had to perform against 12 significant criteria, areas such as the quality of management, financial soundness, value as a long-term investment, innovation, quality of marketing, community, corporate governance, use of corporate assets, inspirational leaders, company competitiveness. So these brands have succeeded as all-round performers across the board, and it represents an important survey for the health of the B2B sector. And whilst Unilever is there with many fast-moving consumer goods and B2C brands, it's a really useful survey to study and identify who was better at which areas. And there's lots of insights that you can gain from these awards and surveys that help you deliver learnings from the theory of the brand prism and the Love Marks model. Really getting to grips with the brand's DNA helps you build successful brands for tomorrow. Looking at top growing brands, this is an interesting study where we're purely looking predominantly at consumer biased brands. Key ingredients of these growing brands have a significantly growing user base, financially and visibly growing, spotlight on innovation, or international and innovation, and strong financial results. Again, these are brands that are good to watch, to learn from. And what's interesting to see here is across these different brands and surveys, there are a number of names that consistently pop up, and these are brands that are useful to follow as benchmarks. One of the key things that these brands, these top growing brands, do more than any others is they make customers' lives better. They help us curate our lives, but they also help us streamline our lives, make them simpler and better. So the final case study that we're going to finish with is Great Britain campaign, and why not? This started in 2012 with the Olympics, the Paralympics, and the Diamond Jubilee, and there's a great summary there of our wonderful landscapes, entrepreneurialism, education, fashion. And the amazing moments really celebrate the landscape and the culture and environment of the UK, which is great for a Brexit era. The campaign's run in 144 countries and covered 300 cities. So actually, if you've got an amazing brand, it's definitely one to get involved with. So it celebrates UK entrepreneurs, and creative talent. So what are the final 5 key tips for brands and brand experiences? The first one is drill down to the brand essence. Really go back to the roots and values of your founders. What was it that inspired them originally that customers tapped into first? Define what the brand DNA is, your values, priorities, and permeate those through every aspect of the organisation. Make sure that simplicity counts when you craft your customer journeys and really focus on the experience for the customer. Remember, it's one connected experience across channel, device, platform. Also consider that you might be a startup, you might be a small business, you might be a PLC, but it is a borderless world. As soon as you have a website, you're an international brand. So where do we go next after this presentation? I hope I've given you an insight into some of the theory, practical, and fascinating areas of brand and customer experience. If you'd like to study further, there are individual unit awards that you could start off with where you can earn a certificate. Or you could look at studying brand customer experience through the different levels of the qualifications from level 3 up to level 7. They offer you flexible, smart, and work-applied solutions to study. They give you the credibility, confidence, and performance to grow your career and your company. If you'd like to study or find out more, if you follow the CIM.co.uk study centres list, you'll find a local study centre in the UK or internationally that will be able to help you find out more about qualifications. The critical thing for you is to make sure that you celebrate the brands and have the support of both your insight, the practice, and qualifications that can add depth and breadth to your career. I'd like to say thank you now for listening, and perhaps if we move into questions, I look forward to answering or discussing those with you. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sarah. We're now going to answer some of the questions that have been submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit your questions via the box in the attendee control panel. Right, first question we've got here. Where will I gain the best brand experience, i.e. from a small firm or from a large company?
Okay, that's a good question. With brand experience, ideally you want to get close to the customer. So in a small business, if it's early on in your career, it's fantastic because you'll often get close experience of all aspects because there's a small team. In a larger company, you have to be a lot more proactive. You've got to go and work with other departments, ask to see how they manage and treat customers, listen into research, go out and meet the customer. So I'd say in a big company, you can still get great experience, but you've got to be a lot more proactive. In a small business, it's a question of dive in, experience everything, learn quickly, and look for improvements.
Great, thank you. Maria asks, when you evolve and increase your pricing by a certain percentage, how do you carry your existing customers along, especially if you've enjoyed a high rate of client retention for 10 years of business?
Okay, I think in terms of pricing, it's important to be transparent. I think it's one of those things that's important to explain to customers the reason for the price increases, and also to give them formal notice or prior notice of changes in prices. Customers won't be surprised. The nature of economic conditions are that sadly prices are rising for everyone. But I think clarity, transparency and good communication are really important. And to actually look carefully at your pricing and your business model to see where those costs need to increase. But also are there other ways that you could add value to that relationship as well. So I wouldn't just put the prices up. I'd actually also look at the product and service on offer and see if there are areas that you can improve and add value as well as increase the price.
Victoria asks, how can you proactively protect a brand from things going wrong and brand disasters?
Okay, the reality is things will go wrong from time to time. Often with a well-established brand, there's goodwill that's built up over time. A critical thing really is about trust here, and trust is, again, about good communication. Protecting the brand is actually quite simple in the sense of trying to do the right thing at every touch point. But also, if you see a problem, don't shy away from it. Get it sorted, get it defined, and have an open conversation with customers and show that you're willing to fix it and improve. The reality is we're all human, mistakes get made, but proactivity, the odd apology, and a commitment to fix can actually engender loyalty and retention. So that can help protect and obviously build up goodwill for having good performance over time too.
How important is the mission and vision to the overall brand essence and guidelines? Does it need to be in there? That's from Holly.
Okay, missions and visions are very important because they're statements that tell stakeholders and customers who you are, what you do. They're part of your purpose. The difficulty is that sometimes they get a bit corporatized, as in they aren't necessarily expressed in the language that customers might use. So they're hugely important because they define your purpose, but they don't really work well on their own. You need to have a defined set of values that sit along those so that staff know what the behaviours are to meet them and customers know what experience that they'll get. So I'd say that mission and vision are very important as statements of intent and purpose, but I wouldn't want to look at them alone without the values, which are really important to confirm what your brand stands for and why it exists and what it offers.
And we've had a couple of questions around engaging employees. What would you say is the influence of corporate culture on brand experience?
It's a huge factor. I think one of the challenges that we have today is that life is so busy that we can end up working in silos. So each business area focuses on what it has to do and on its priorities. And what can tend to happen with culture and customer experience is that we inwardly focus. So marketers really need to be champions of the customer experience and share the maps, the customer journeys that they have so that other departments understand what the customer is experiencing, the points to celebrate, but perhaps also those pain points that other departments might not realise they're causing or affecting. So I'd say I'd try and avoid the inward focus. I'd look at the values you have for your brand. I'd map the customer journey and I'd collaborate really closely with other teams, departments or colleagues to really deliver a great experience for your customers.
What would you suggest is the best approach for improving a brand that has been around for 50 years but not had any real focus and needs to be developed to fit in with the needs of the now different client demands? Not only changing this for the customer but also for the staff. That's from Tom.
Okay, that is quite a challenging one because I suspect the values and behaviours are quite ingrained. If it's 50 years old, then it suggests that the founder may still be around or may be looking for an exit. That's not always the case. But I'd first of all go back to the roots and the ethos of why the business existed in the first place. I'd also look very carefully at the current customer experience, the current proposition. I would look at competitor insight as well. And then I'd actually step back and look at my business model and say, have I actually got the right business model and proposition for where the business is now, but also where the marketplace is going in the future, because technology is going to create so many opportunities to automate or improve customer experience. And then I'd look back and I'd get all of my communication materials together and look at the mixture of imagery and messages that I'm sending out. And I'd step back and start to look at what is it that the customer is experiencing. And then I would define what I think the DNA of the business is. I would talk to customers, but I'd really look at a strong creative execution to contemporize the brand, but also to make sure that I embed it with the key values that customers value now and future. So that's a brand in transition, but it needs obviously a lot of diagnosis, a lot of investigation, but also probably some creative development to enthuse and empower employees for the future. A clear vision, clear strategy, clear values should then actually help people collaborate together because they've got to focus on where the business is going, and that's an exciting prospect then for employees and customers to focus on.
Thanks, Sarah. We've got a question here about careers. What are the steps towards becoming a marketing manager?
Okay, there's a number of steps that you can follow. The first one is, if you're looking to qualify through the CIM route, is to find out your entry level. What you can do is contact a study centre, let them know what your final or your last qualification was for level, whether it was a degree or other course. And from that and your CV, they'd be able to advise what level of qualification to pursue. Typically, to be a marketing manager, you'd expect to be working towards the certificate or the diploma level qualification. The diploma level would give you the strategic part, but I'd have a chat with your study centre and look to perhaps coming in at certificate or diploma, depending on past qualifications and CV.
Perfect. We've got another career question. Agency or in-house, which is better?
Oh, it's a tough one. I'm a big fan of both. I think it's really important. What would I say? I've done agency and in-house. I did agency earlier on in my career because the hours are long. Clients are exciting and challenging. But the fact that you work across a number of different clients is fantastic for your career skills, creativity, commercial skills, and working with clients as well. When I worked for an agency, they made us work on both business to business and business to consumer, and it was great because we could take a lot of the skills from one discipline to another. I'd say agency is great for thinking on your feet, working under pressure. There are long hours, but it's a very exciting place to work, very rewarding. In-house, you get a bit more insight on the strategic side. You get the politics and challenges too, but you also get the great budgets to work with, and then you can also work with agencies too. So I'm a big fan, if I'm looking at CVs, if you've got both agency and in-house experience, I think that's a really good all-round marketer.
Great. We've got a question here from Vanette. I manage a remittance brand that is perceived as old. How best can I change this perception to one that's more modern?
I think I'd go back to what the proposition is for the customer and define what old means. Sometimes there is value in a heritage as a craft. I think if you're looking to contemporise, then it is about looking at the technology and making sure that the proposition is contemporary, modern and up to date. Then I'd actually look at the way I manifest the service amongst staff and delivery, and then to re-educate people to move perhaps from their existing perception to shift them. It is going to be about communications. Leveraging digital will be really powerful, kind of using video, photography, case studies, demonstrations. All of those things will enliven the brand and allow people to see it with a fresh eye, different perspective. So I would dive into digital, but I'd clearly define things first. And I'd have a regular program of content and communications to actually keep moving the brand forward so it is viewed as contemporary.
That's great. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you for everyone for attending today's webinar. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to email us at qualifications@cim.co.uk. Once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey on the presentation, and we'd appreciate it if you could complete that and provide your feedback. You'll also receive a follow-up email within the next couple of days with a link to view the recording of today's webinar. Just a reminder that you can find out more about CIM qualifications by visiting our website. On behalf of CIM and Sarah, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.